Okay, well, I am very pleased today to present to you some information about an initiative known as mCODE, which stands for Minimal Common Oncology Data Elements. The ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve is to develop a learning health system. And this is one of many definitions of the learning health system. It's one I personally like very much. An integrated health system which harnesses the power of data and analytics to learn from every patient and feed the knowledge of what works best back to clinicians, health professionals, patients, and other stakeholders to create cycles of continuous improvement. And it really does achieve something that I think all of us in clinical research have been chasing for quite some time, which is the integration of care in the routine clinical care environment with the knowledge that we gain from more formal approaches such as clinical trials and comparative effectiveness research and observational studies. To achieve this, however, we need to achieve some goals that we have not yet completed. And the first and foremost, this is a wall as a representative of what we are trying to build. And the foundation for that wall is computable data standards. Without computable data standards, having data access becomes difficult, challenging to integrate various data sources, and tools and analytics are only going to work on the data collections that they were developed for. They are not going to be able to pull in the very broad range of data that we need to truly create a learning health system. And we know a little bit about trying to pull data from the clinical care environment and use it for research and for development of new therapeutic approaches. We've been doing this in a number of different systems and structures over the last few years, just taking data from EHRs as they are currently configured. And this is an example of, unfortunately, what happens when we try to do that. This is from ASCO's Cancer Link. This has been more than a year ago now that Bob Miller and his team gave me these data. And as you can see, a very simple question: is the patient a smoker or not? This look into CancerLink data pulled 15.5 million entries. And what you see here is a subset of 51 different ways that this relatively straightforward question was answered in data that was collected out of the EHRs that you see here: Allscripts, Epic, Area, Mosaic, etc. And if you look down through this with the eyes of someone who is a clinical researcher and trying to understand how you would put together a data set and understand the impact of smoking on whatever other endpoint you're trying to use, all the different representations of tobacco use make it incredibly difficult to conduct very high quality, outcome-driven research. And if it's this hard for a question like smoking, just imagine how much more challenging it is for questions such as, is the patient responding to a treatment or not? So when we look at structured data from current EHRs, we can put it into several categories. Some structured, relatively interoperable data elements are there: diagnosis codes, encounter codes, infused medicines, laboratory tests. Believe it or not, smoking ended up in the generally data available, although usually not well formatted list. But then we quickly see that there's some really crucial data that is only sometimes available: performance status, receptor profiles for breast cancer, oral medications. And then in the red, you see data that is almost never available. What kind of surgery exactly did a patient have and what were the indications? Genetic tests, treatment intent, and then in bold down there at the bottom, disease status. Is a disease progressing, stable, Or does the patient have no evidence of disease after a cancer treatment? If we can't get this kind of information out of a clinical record, it is very difficult to perform some of the research that we really want to see possible. So the vision for the work of mCODE is that patient data collected once will support many uses of the data. And this is a rather busy slide, but I show here in my pointer the providers, the doctors at the bedside who are evaluating a patient and gathering data that is incredibly valuable for a host of other uses. For academic researchers over here in the upper right-hand side, for medical product companies, researchers of all types, including those in the pharmaceutical industry, for patients and their caregivers, and a growing need to have patients have understanding and access to their data. And then finally, the payers and researchers who are working in the all-important field of understanding how we can better use our healthcare resources to achieve better results for our patients. In the center, I'll remind you again, are the providers who are a powerful force for provision of this data, but right now don't have the tools in their hands to be able to provide the data in a way that it can actually be used for the aims that we are trying to achieve. So this is mCODE. The purpose of this, it's a new data standard. The purpose was to develop and maintain standard computable data formats, known as mCODE, to achieve data interoperability and enable progress in clinical care quality initiatives, clinical research, and healthcare policy development. And you see 6 organizations that were the original sponsors of this mCODE initiative, and also a logo showing that it is based on the HL7 Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource background to allow data collected in a clinical environment to be transferred electronically for aggregation. So up at the top, you see the title. What is mCODE trying to do? It is trying to put tools for the growth of a data language, a standardized data language, into the hands of the users. I want to emphasize that mCODE is absolutely not an initiative for a bunch of users to get together in a very relatively small group and decide, here's the data standard and everyone must use it. That type of activity is doomed to failure. Instead, mCODE is designed to be a minimal core set that hopefully users will embrace and expand and use so that this language can grow organically by those who are actually using it. Down here you see a URL to be able to find the first version of mCODE, which are 73 data elements that constitutes the minimum set of data that the originators felt were important to achieve on every patient with cancer. In addition to the mCODE data language, there is Codex. Codex is an HL7 FHIR accelerator. It stands for Common Oncology Data Elements Extensions, and this is exactly what Codex is designed to do. It is a community and a platform to accelerate interoperable data modeling and implementation of mCODE. It is designed to be the environment where those who want to use mCODE can gain assistance, integration with other efforts, and be a focus for growth and development of this new data language. Codex has within it something known as a community of practice, which is a group of health systems and supporting organizations that are working together within this Codex FHIR Accelerator community to develop and share best practices for implementing mCODE and its language extensions as it grows into production electronic health records and other systems. You see here on the right a list of organizations that are currently participating in the community of practice, and it continues to grow daily. And then on the bottom, across the bottom, you can see some of the things that the community of practice provides in web-based learning sessions, latest developments on mCODE, Codex, and cancer data exchanges. It's an environment where collaborators can work to share best practices for clinical workflows, modeling and exchange, and to ask questions and learn from each other as the mCODE data language grows. I'm just going to give you one very specific example that might put this into better context as to how this all really works. It's an initiative of the five, supported by the 5 groups you see here. The Alliance for Clinical Trials in Oncology, MITRE Corporation, the EPIC EHR vendor, the NCI, and funded partially by the Rising Tide Foundation. It stands for Integrating Clinical Trials and Real-World Endpoints. What it does is it looks at case report forms from Alliance clinical trials and asks the question, how well does mCODE, the first version, cover the data that is required to complete case report forms for an Alliance clinical trial? So this is the iCare data use case. So the first activity that happened was an Alliance case report form to mCODE mapping. After the Alliance case report form to mCODE mapping, we found out exactly how much data could be converted to mCODE and extracted from an electronic health record. Then, working with partners in MITRE, we developed an implementation priority to decide which elements needed to be pulled from the electronic health record. The MITRE group has a team working with us called the STEAM team, which stands for Scalable Technology for EHR Adoption of mCODE. They partnered with EPIC to develop an implementation that allowed us to extract clinical trials data elements from the electronic health record of the EPIC instance. They developed a playbook that described exactly how these data elements would be configured and coded so that they could be extracted. And working with EPIC provided an implementation allowing the data to be pulled from the electronic health record via an API into the Alliance database. I know this is a very quick description of a very detailed project. The message here for those who are interested in using mCODE is this is an example of a use case where we took the mCODE elements, decided which would suit our needs, developed a method to obtain those data structures from the electronic health record, and are now launching them in our clinical trials. Finally, in doing this process, we found out, as I'm sure is no surprise to you all, that everything we needed was not in mCODE. So what do? We provided that information back, these gaps, back to the Codex community, where we will work on new iterations of mCODE that could more fully serve the needs of the cancer clinical trials community. There are a lot of other use cases now underway in mCODE to grow this language. You see some examples here. In addition to the Alliance clinical trials data use case, there is a clinical trials patient matching use case. This is led by the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, but you can see other collaborators here. There are registry reporting use cases underway, a radiation oncology care coordinating use case, clinical care pathways, and a prior authorization use case. All of these are under execution by Codex, and all of these in these organizations listed here are participating in the mCODE community of practice. So finally, I just want to acknowledge the initial collaborators within mCODE. These are the major organizations that have got this initiative off to, we believe, is a very good start. And then end with today with 2 sites where anyone who's interested in further information can go to find this. Thank you very much.